In this tutorial today, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to edit or color grade your images in Photoshop. So this tutorial is basically about how to edit your raw files or how to work with your raw images in Photoshop. I've been getting so many questions about how I do edit my raw images and how to color grade my raw images in Photoshop. So this tutorial basically is about the best way I edit or color grade my raw images or my raw files in Photoshop. So I know so many photographers really are so addicted to JPEG files because they have those very nice and vibrant colors, and they fear taking raw files or shooting in RAW because they fear they may not be able to color grade or gain back those beautiful vibrant colors that are provided when people take the photos in the JPEG format. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you guys and getting you to recover from that kind of fear of taking your images in the raw format. So this is the image we are going to be working with, and we are going to be color grading or editing this image in Photoshop so that we can get back those beautiful and well vibrant colors like those embedded in the JPEG files those people really enjoy retouching or editing. So a raw file basically contains so much detail, and you have the capability to gain back most of the details if at all you shoot in RAW. So it has so many advantages when you shoot your images in RAW, because you can gain back the lost details if you shoot RAW, unlike for those people that shoot in JPEG format. All the information is embedded in the photo, and you cannot adjust or change specific images or details in the images. So as you can see, I took this image using a Canon EOS 6D camera, and I'm using an older version of camera, that's 9.9. And the settings I used basically, I shot this image at f5. The reason for shooting it at f5 is because I wanted to regain as much detail in this image. Then I also used an 85mm 1.8 for Canon, and I shot it at 1/800th of a second and ISO 200. This image was shot at around 10 a.m. So for my lighting setup, I used a Godox AD600 BM, and it was right in the softbox on the left or on the right hand side of the model. So this is the softbox, the black thing you can see right here. So basically that is what I used to shoot this image. So after you have dragged your image in Camera Raw, and I didn't introduce myself, I'm Ronix from Ronix Photography. So let's kick in and start learning about how to edit your raw images or how to edit your raw files in Photoshop. So after you have dragged your image in Photoshop, this is Photoshop CC. It will automatically open the Camera Raw filter, and if at all you don't have it, you should be having this filter, but you shouldn't mind or worry about that. If at all you don't have it and you have Lightroom, it is the same method or the same basic steps you're going to be using for color grading your raw images. So this is a tutorial to make you recover from that fear of shooting in RAW. So I'm going to be teaching you guys, and after this tutorial you're going to be really amazed by the power of shooting in RAW. So after you have dragged your image into your Photoshop and your Camera Raw filter has been opened, this is the interface of my Camera Raw. So you'll be having these sliders right here, the basic sliders, and after that you'll be having all these other options to work with. So we're going to be going through all these options to work with them. So if at all you have a newer version of Camera Raw filter, I'm sorry, I have to go in depth or in details about this Camera Raw. So for newer versions, I think you have all these sliders. These options are just embedded right this side, and I think you have your camera calibration right within the basic or slightly above the basic panel. So you shouldn't get worried if at all we start color grading our raw image. So first of all, I usually want to calibrate my images. So image calibration is a method whereby I want to look at the image the way I was looking at it initially on my camera screen. So I'm going to look for the camera calibration option. So this is my camera calibration option. So different cameras have different camera profiles or picture profiles that are embedded in those cameras. So in order to get back to the image the way you are looking at it on at the back of your camera screen, you have to come right down here. So usually I shoot my images in camera landscape. The reason for that is because landscape usually has those nice, vibrant, and awesome colors to look at. So it doesn't matter. It is all about a photographer's choice and preferences. So I'm just going to come and click on camera landscape like that. So when I click on landscape, you see I've gotten back those beautiful colors. And after I have done that, I'm just going to come under my basic adjustments, and I'm going to start adjusting the image details, because you can see we have kind of blown out whites on the image, so we want to fix that. So if at all you shoot your images in JPEG, you will not be able to adjust these. So first of all, I start by pulling down my highlights to get rid of those whites in the image. So I prefer to knock them down to around -73. So you can see we have just gotten rid of that whitish area, but it is still being seen, or it is still evident in the image. So I prefer to also come to my whites, and I also knock them down slightly. So after I have done that, I prefer to add more contrast in the blacks by knocking down the blacks too, like that. I'm going to go with 20. So you can see I really have so much to work with, and we are getting back the image details, and most of them are not blown out for this case. So you're going to come to the shadows, and I prefer to always knock up my shadows slightly. I don't want to take my shadows way overboard, because when I do that, you see when I take it all the way up, I'm going to be losing out the information that is embedded in the blacks, and my blacks are going to kind of turn somehow gray. So I'm going to come and I'm going to knock it up slightly to around 36. Then I'm going to pump up my contrast slightly to around 4, like that, because I prefer nice contrast images. And I'm going to remember I shoot with Canon, and Canon usually has so much magentas embedded. You can see I have so much reds or magentas in the image, so I want to deal with that. So in order to deal with that, I have to look for the opposite of magenta under my tint slider. So the opposite of magenta is green, so I have to move this slider towards the green or the greens of the image. So I think this is fine. 11 is fine, because I prefer warm images. So after I've done that, I'm going to pump up my exposure a little bit to around 1. I think that is fine. Then I'm going to come under my clarity, and I'm going to pump it up. The reason for doing this is because I want to add more details into the image. Then since my image looks kind of saturated or too vibrant, I'm going to knock down my vibrance slightly to around -5. I think this is fine for this case. So after I've done the basic adjustments, but I still feel like my image still has some kind of magenta, so I'm going to continue knocking it down slightly to around -14. I think this looks fine. So after I have done that, I usually come to my detail panel, all the details. So for newer versions, I think all this is embedded in different folders, so you just have to click and open them to look for the details. So after coming to the detail panel, I prefer to add some little bit of sharpening to my portrait. So I'm going to hold down the alternate button and drag this slider slightly. I don't want to overdo this. Then after I mask the reason for masking is because I want to sharpen specific areas of the image, or not sharpening the overall image. So I'm going to hold down the alternate button, click on this slider and start moving it. So you have to move it until you see like your model or your subject is really highlighted well. So I think that is fine. So only the highlighted areas are going to be sharpened. So unclick the alternate button, and after you have done that, I usually prefer to come to my HSL panel because I'm not a fan of these natural greens. So what I usually do is I play around with the greens in the image. So I prefer to first of all come to the greens or the hue option of the greens, and I prefer to turn them bluish because I prefer them that way. Then I prefer to come to the saturation. I'm going to pump down the saturation of the greens in this very image. So I'm going to go with negative 68. I think this brings back more emphasis onto the image. And after I've done so, we shall be coming back to the camera calibration in a short while. So after I've done that, I'm going to open the image into Photoshop, and I show you the other adjustments I prefer to do to my raw files or my raw images. So in order to open your image as a smart object so that you can come back and adjust the settings, we are going to hold down the alternate key or the alternate button on the keyboard, and when you hold that down, you will notice this change from open image to open copy. So when you click on it, your image is going to be opened as a smart object in Photoshop. So the reason for doing that is because we want to adjust those settings. I don't know what we did wrong there, but this is our image right now. So basically, after doing those adjustments, you shouldn't worry even if it is not a smart object. We're just going to duplicate this, and we can interchange or edit those values later on. So you're just going to create a duplicate of the background layer by clicking Ctrl or Command J on the keyboard, and you're going to first of all crop the image, because I usually post the images on Instagram, and it usually has a crop ratio that is maybe approved by the Instagram maybe creators or the algorithm, or maybe a designer. So come to the crop tool and make sure the cropping is in a ratio of 45 or 8:10. The reason for that is because we want the image to fit in the whole screen of the device of a person who is going to view the image after we have posted. So drag up, and we are just going to crop this image. So click enter. So we have cropped out the softbox, which was initially right above here. So after doing so, I usually want my images to have those beautiful and nice and vibrant skin tones, and in order to achieve that, I prefer to come right under the adjustments, and I'm going to come to the brightness and contrast. So under the brightness and contrast, I'm going to be having this beautiful option where I'm going to adjust the contrast of this image to have those beautiful skin tones for the image. So I'm going to, first of all, I prefer to activate use legacy because it brings out those rich, nice and vibrant skin tones for the image the way someone was looking at it initially on the camera screen. So I'm going to move this slider slightly. So when you use legacy and turn this down, you can see what has happened. The image, it basically gets lost completely, and when you turn it up, you see what basically happens to the image. So you shouldn't want to overdo that. So we are just going to move it just slightly to around 2, like that. 2 or 3 will do. So you can see we have just gotten back those beautiful that beautiful contrast and those nice warm skin tones. Then after I've done so, I'm going to come right to the selective color option. So this is basically where the other magic of color grading happens. So come under selective color, and after you have opened your selective color, you have, and you drop this down, you have so many options to work with. So first of all, I prefer to play around with my blacks, because I want the blacks in the image to look black. Remember, when you're pulling up your shadows in Camera Raw or Lightroom, or whichever case you may be using, your image basically loses out on the blackness, or your black tends to turn out to be grayish. So I prefer, first of all, uh, pump up the blacks, the black in the black. So when I pump it up, you can see what basically happens. So it is really a matter of taste and preference. If at all you want to go for that matte old film like look, you can turn them towards the negative side, and if at all you want those rich black tones, just turn it towards the right hand side. So I'll go with an option of 3 for the blacks, and I prefer to add some kind of bluish feel to the image, so I prefer to go with -2. So you can see the before and after for just our blacks option. So you're going to come to the greens, and you're going to play around with this to see if at all we can change the greens in the image. So this does not do that much, but I think I prefer them towards that side. So I'm going to play around with the magenta. As you can see what it does to the greens, so I'm going to leave it to around 5. Then the yellows, you can see when you turn the yellows all the way towards the left, your greens are going to turn kind of bluish. So, and when you turn it right, you get more of the green. So you're just going to do it slightly. I think that looks fine and beautiful. So this really looks nice and beautiful. So you can see we have just opened the Photoshop, and these are the adjustments we have just done right in Photoshop. So we are going to create another stamp visible layer. So you can create all these after you have maybe retouch your image in Photoshop. So after you have done your retouching, you can as well open your image back again into your Camera Raw filter, and first of all, you have to create a stamp visible layer by clicking Shift Alternate Control E on the keyboard to create a stamp visible layer. And first of all, duplicate or make a copy of that stamp visible layer by clicking Ctrl J or Command J on the keyboard. Then come back to Filter and come to Camera Raw filter. So when you come to Camera Raw filter, you have, after retouching, I prefer to as well do the eye whitening for the image. And before I do that, you can come back to the camera calibration, and remember, if at all you shoot in JPEG, you can only color grade using the camera calibration option. You can only color grade using only these options. You won't have that camera calibration or picture profile or camera profile option. So that's why you can see we have lost out on the picture or camera profile option. So this you have to do more color grading if at all you wish, by playing around with these sliders. You can see when you turn this towards the hue, you get magentas, and this side you get more yellows or warm tones to the image. So we're just going to do that -1 and turn down the saturation slightly. So depending on your taste and preference, then we're going to come to the blue primary and we see what it gives us. So we're going to go with 5, and saturation, we're just going to knock it down slightly. So after we have done that, we're going to come back to the basic option, and we are going to zoom into the eyes. So this is basically what I do after I have retouched and color graded the image. So it doesn't matter, the order basically doesn't matter, because you can as well first retouch and color grade later, but I prefer first of all do the color grading or calibration in Camera Raw, take it into Photoshop, retouch, and do more color grading. And I finish by doing this first step I'm about to show you guys. So after zooming into the eyes, we want to whiten the model's eyes. Get your adjustment brush tool, or you can just click K on the keyboard. So under the adjustment brush tool, we have these options right here. So you can see we have temperature, tint, and everything like in the basic option of camera raw. So we have to set our brush so that we get the eyes to become white. So make sure the temperature is -28, the tint is 72, the highlights at 6, the whites at 6, and the saturation at -74. Remember, the reason for saturation being at -74, we want to remove color from the white area of the eye, and the reason for the temperature being towards the cold side is because we want to remove the warm tones from the white area of the eye, and the tint being up, we want to reserve that kind of reddish kind of naturalness that is always embedded in our eyes. So you're just going to start painting, and when you're painting, make sure you only paint over the area that is meant to be white in the image. So if at all maybe you accidentally paint on the skin, you can see it is going to desaturate or remove color from the skin area. So you're going to click Ctrl Z or Command Z on the keyboard to undo that. Just paint over only on the white area of the eye. So I have seen so many people, they tend to paint over this part. Now this part is not white. We all have this reddish kind of pink or orange kind of corner in our eyes, so that part is not meant to be white. So don't paint over that, because you're going to be having your eyes or the eyes of the subject looking so unnatural and robotic. So just paint over the eyes. So I think that is fine for the eye whitening. And after we have done that, I just open or click OK on the keyboard, and you can as well go ahead to save your image in Photoshop. So if at all you love to learn about how to save or export your images in Photoshop, I'm going to put a link right above here so that you can learn about how to save or export your images in Photoshop. So this has been a tutorial about how to edit and color grade your raw files, or how to work with your raw images in Photoshop. And this is the same method, or there are the same steps you have to follow while color grading your images in Lightroom too, because it is the same steps that have to be followed for color grading your raw images in Lightroom too. So if at all you love this tutorial, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to hit the like button on the keyboard, and don't forget to give me feedback in the comment section. I'm Ronix from Ronix Photography. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to keep practicing and keep creating.